some preliminary understandings. We are, with Jared has agreed to help us test pilot our YouTube Live, which really just means that we have it set up. We're going to do YouTube Live. Like, we haven't told anybody today that this is YouTube Live, but what we'd like to do in the future. So we have to test pilot how it goes, how a different speaker uses the mic, and then how long it takes to upload. So those are some of our things we have to try. And so he's willing to do that for us. So that's up there over. I'm not going to move it around. If you move it around, I'm not worried about it. We're just going to try to see how it goes. But for those of you who don't know, as you can see here, this is Jared. He's from the Darke Soil and Water Conservation District. If you ask me anytime I cannot see it, I get it all mixed up with what he's doing. But we absolutely enjoy when he comes to come out and do presentations for us. Always has a lot of great ideas, insight, and then today, as you can see, we're going to make some seed bombs. So
yes,
we're just super excited that he's here and have any questions or everything. He's going to take it over. He knows all the answers.
I don't know if I know all the answers. Yes. So I don't. But I guess in this case, would I be considered the test dummy?
No, I did not. I
kind of think that's where we're at here. Oh, okay. I'm okay if that's the case.
It's only directed at the presenter, correct? The camera is only directed at the presenter. Well, I would be nervous too. Sorry.
So there's a number of things I'm going to try and go over today. One is just native plants, how we can use them in rain gardens, and just utilize, that native plant to create a more easily managed area and beautify an area as well, and not have to, bring in other species, start planting those things that grow here. And then I want to just kind of touch on rain barrels and how you can utilize rain. So the same with the rain garden, rain barrel, and kind of mix in the native plants. But what we're going to start with is a pollinator seed bomb. So you all have, I need to probably pass this around and let everybody pour themselves some water in their cup or bowl. And this will help. I'll just pass it around. And what you do is, what about, yeah. And we can get more. So this will help me if I'm nervous, I can just sit up here, and you just want to kind of tear into smaller pieces, because we're going to make a pollinator seed bomb at the end of this, but we want to get our pieces tore up and let them soak up some of that water, so that at the end of it, we'll put some seed in it, we'll make the bomb, and then you can take it out and color the world with it. All right, so first thing I'll do is kind of get this maybe boring stuff out of the way, but talk about what the Soil and Water Office is. We are a county office. We're a subdivision of the state. We get funding from the local, county, state, and sometimes federal funding. And mostly we work with agriculture. We'll work with farmers to put in conservation practices to address water quality, to address soil erosion. The big thing is, water quality, protect the soil, and then also protect habitat, which is where pollinators, native plants fits in quite a bit in our mission. So we do a lot of programs for children and adults. We just actually came off of a 2-day conservation camp out at Chenoweth Trails. So that's why I'm in shorts, because we were kind of unpacking and cleaning up that area before I got over here. But really, we assist, any landowner that comes in our office, we will try to help them and either get the answer for them, or we will find someone that they can talk to, because a big thing is we don't want to just kind of point people and say, hey, you need to call this office. Stop calling us. We want to help you get the answer. So really, Soil and Waters started obviously because of the Dust Bowl many, many years ago. And hopefully we never go back to that. But it eventually, created enough of a dust cloud that it reached DC, and they created the Soil Conservation Service at that time, which led to the creation of Soil and Water offices. So there are, every county in the state has a Soil and Water office. Every state, has soil and water. So there's a lot of opportunities there. It started with wind erosion. Now we deal with some water quality issues that have really put some focus on how do we keep these nutrients on the soil and from getting into our water system. The big one was actually, I think it was before 19, was when Toledo actually had to stop using their water. They had to boil everything. It was a huge issue, and it really led to Governor DeWine creating the H2 Ohio program to address, excuse me, to address water quality issues. Because one of the things, yes.
I'm sorry, question.
Yes.
How much of this can you tear up?
You can tear up as much as you would like, because what you're going to do is make somewhere between like maybe a baseball size or maybe even a couple of them if you want. So it's really however big or however many that you have, however many pollinator bombs you want. And I do have more newspaper back here if you want to go really big. And I have more bowls, so we can get you as big a bomb as you want. So water quality has been an issue. When Toledo had to not utilize their water, I mean, just think of the impact that would have on everything you do. And then back about 10 years ago, we had a big bloom on the Ohio River. Cincinnati has that uptake. Usually we always think about those algae blooms up in, Grand Lake St. Mary's, up in Lake Erie. We actually had one on the Ohio River, and those are issues that we need to address. And
The Gulf of Mexico, the one they're doing right now, the problem they're having now.
yeah, so the Gulf of Mexico is the hypoxic zone. So that's mostly nitrogen going down, the Ohio River to the Mississippi, down to the Gulf of Mexico, and it creates that hypoxic zone. Most of the stuff going north into like Grand Lake St. Mary's and Lake Erie, they talk about phosphorus a lot, but really you need both of those things to have that bloom. But it's just a matter of what's more in that area. So we talk about nitrogen a lot as you look at everything that drains to the Ohio River. But that's just a little about what we do and what we kind of are. But to get into what we're talking about today is just that native plants, utilizing them in landscape, and then utilizing them to help with some of those potential water quality issues that we could face. So the big thing when you start talking about natives is some people see them as a weed patch and they don't like them and they think it's unkempt and they're just like, why do you have that? And they don't realize the huge benefit that we get from all of those pollinators that are in that native patch. And then the others see it as, those beautiful wildflowers. If you do it right, you can have blooms throughout the season. And then you're also thinking about how you're contributing to habitat in your area. And then I kind of mentioned at the beginning, so once these things are established, you're really getting rid of some of that work. It's not a maintenance-free type of garden or area that you put in, but it's lower maintenance than if you were to, have a flower bed. This will be a little bit lower maintenance. You'll have to do, some of those things of weed pulling because, our weeds will get in there and they will take over. But these are, utilizing them is something that helps promote soil, water, air quality, helps prevent flooding, which is what we're going to talk about with the rain gardens. And then it can control erosion because you'll have something growing there throughout the year. And then that biodiversity, which is a big thing. We all want those pollinators because we all like food. And then that sustainability piece comes into play as well. So there's a number of ways you can use natives in your landscape. The one I'm going to talk about is rain gardens, but you can also, if you're trying to deal with areas, you can do bioswales, or you can have prairies, or you can have just, a native garden, a flower garden, wildflower garden. When we talk about them being a stormwater BMP, so best management practice, what you're doing is you're putting them in an area that the water can flow to, and then those plants will actually take that water up and let it go through the soil profile as opposed to just flowing off. If it's, a garden or a lawn, it's just going to run to its drainage point. So what is a rain garden? It's a shallow garden that's designed to kind of hold that water there, whether you take it from a rooftop so you could run your downspout into it. If you want to do it off a sidewalk, a driveway, there's a number of areas, any of those kind of hard surfaces that you may have where your water will flow down and it exits at a point, you can put a rain garden there to manage that water. And what it'll do is it's not, like a detention or retention pond, but it will hold some of that water back. And then, like I said, those plants will utilize it and allow it to go through the profile. Instead of just running across the ground and creating an issue. We installed one in Greenville. Man, that's probably been 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And it was basically the street kind of dead ended into this, basically like a side ditch kind of, and then there was a field behind it. And what was running off that street went into the field and you could start to see the runoff. And so we talked to the city of Greenville, we have a partnership with. We talked to them about installing a rain garden there to maybe slow that down, let that water go through the profile and stop, eroding back behind it in the field. And after about 4 or 5 years, you started to see that the farmer was able to kind of manage that, and that big gully that used to be there is no longer there now. It's a neat little success where it doesn't handle all the water, but it does handle a lot of it, and it slows it down and then lets it kind of trickle out across the surface. You will want to have, like a mixture of your plants that'll have the wet feet that like to have wet feet. So those are going to be the ones in the middle. And then as you get to the edges will be the ones that are a little bit drier condition. And these are things you can use at your home, and you can also use them in those commercial sites. So this is kind of what a rain garden design looks like. So in this case, we're catching the downspout, and you could surface flow it in there, or, like they're showing that you would actually have a pipe, put it into that garden. You're going to have kind of your bowl, and then you'll make sure you'll have a berm on the downstream side of it, because again, you're trying to hold that water back. And then you want to have an outlet or an overflow just in case, you get those like we've been getting in the last number of years, those 3-inch rains. You're not going to build a garden big enough to hold that, but you want to make sure you can overflow it. So like in this case, you can see how it helps with water quality, because if you don't have that there, everything's just going to go either from a gutter to the street or the curb and get into our stormwater system, and it's just going to be, or it's going to surface flow and pick up any of those nutrients or any of the sediment that may be there and run off into our storm system and cause issues there, where if we can slow it down, we can allow that to go through the profile. Yes.
We didn't know about this, but a couple years ago, well, when my parents built a new house back in 2011, they ran a tile, or just a gut. What did they run out to the remember the trees? And it was from the gutters. I don't know if it wasn't under the ground. Or maybe it was, but then it just ended. After so many feet, it just ended. Well, guess what? You get about 10 years, and then it's just a swampy area. Out there. This would have been an appropriate thing in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, because eventually that's just going to make that area a damp area.
They brought tile in and
tile it. Yep, and get it away. That's true. And that is another option. This is one of those that just help kind of beautify that area. So kind of how that garden works. So you do direct your rainwater into it. And again, the water soaks in instead of running over it. You'll have those kind of deep-rooted plants down there that'll help not only take up the water, but they'll also help break up that soil and allow channels for the water to flow through. And that's just, you're going to have those contaminants depending on where it's at, like that street runoff. There were more contaminants in that than there would be catching your roof water. But these plants are going to be there'll be a hardy plant and will allow that natural process to take place to kind of break those things down. So the big thing when you go into constructing, the first thing you do anytime you're going to dig is call 811. You want to make sure you do not hit any utilities, because that can be a pain and that can be extremely dangerous. So call 811 so you can get your utilities located. If you're doing this rain garden to catch your downspouts, you want to be about 10 feet at a minimum, up to 20 feet off of the building. That way, you don't have any of that opportunity for that water to get back into the foundation area. And then consider that outlet, whether it's a natural kind of outlet that it's going, like a pond where you're going to have a spillway that it'll go, or if in our scenario that we had earlier, if you have the opportunity to tile and let that outlet somewhere, that's one of those things you want to do. And then how do you channel that water into your rain garden? We did one, which I'll show in a little bit, out at the Bish Discovery Center there in Greenville for the parks. And we just caught essentially half of that roof, and then the downspout just outlets into it comes over a rock, and then it kind of disperses it into that rain garden. So think about how you want that to get there. Because if you just put your downspout right into, this garden that you build, you think about the velocity that water is going to have coming off the roof, it's just going to kind of wash out that area and just kind of create an issue. So you want to kind of slow it down, spread it out. And then look at, you want to know your soil type and kind of, do you have that clay soil? Do you have a sandy soil? One of the ways to kind of figure out, how your soil is going to drain is you can dig an 8-inch test hole, and you will fill it up with water, let that water drain, and then you'll fill it up with water again and come back in 24 hours and see how far it went down. And that's going to be your depth of your rain garden. And then you're going to look at how much water is coming into that area. So if it's a really large area, you would want a watershed of some sort to figure out what is the surface flow into that point. Or if you're taking a downspout, how much of your roof are you taking? Are you taking half of it, a quarter of it? And you can figure out how much water is going to be there. So that way you can start to work on what your size is. So if you take that area, so if you take your roof size, you divide that by the depth, you'll get your rain garden size. And this is just a calculation for a 1-inch rainfall. So again, we have those larger events that'll happen, so that overflow is always an important thing to have in the design. When you get to the excavation part of it, really, you can do whatever kind of shape you want, and think about, how do you want this garden to look? The big thing you need to stay consistent with is the size of that bowl that you're going to have. If you can shape it however you want to make it match maybe your other beds, to make it match that, if you want to put like a kidney shape in the corner of your property to catch it, whatever you want, that's fine. Shaping is not as big of an issue as the sizing is. And then, just the simple things of outline your garden area, and then you start your excavation. If you're doing, say you're doing an 8-inch deep garden, the bowl is going to be 8 inches deep. You want to go another 2 inches below that, because you're going to add some organic matter. You're going to add some mulch to it, and you want to make sure you have your depth at the end of the process. And then one of the things that I learned as we installed that garden here at the Bish is, you're in the subsoil when you're going down 6-8 inches. So it's going to change. It's going to be a little tougher soil. It's going to be a little clayier. So when you're going to plant those plants in there, you kind of want to have that broken up, because otherwise you're going to be working to dig and put your plants in. So if you take a tiller and kind of till and loosen up that subsoil, and then add your organic material to it and kind of get that mixed up, so you're having, you're kind of creating a topsoil in a way. And then kind of grade it off to make sure your water is not going to just pool in a couple places, that it'll spread throughout the bowl of that garden. And then, you slope your sides to it. If it's at an area where, your garden kind of slopes off itself, you're going to build a berm on the low end to hold your water back. Now you're just going to berm it up to the depth. So you're not going to build a huge berm that it can't go over. Because again, you're just wanting to catch and hold that 1-inch rainfall essentially. And you want to also edge it with something. We've used rock, or just maybe go out a little bit with mulch if you want, to just try and keep your grass from encroaching, so that way it still looks nice, to keep it away from looking like that unkempt weedy patch. So this is an example of another one, just kind of as they start to figure out where their plant spacing is going to be.
That one's too close to their house.
It's pretty close. That doesn't look like that's 10 feet, does it? Man, I'm going to have
But I
to,
see like
I'm going to have to see who that
getting
came
that
to.
downspout water though. Like I get that.
Yeah, but that's definitely not 10 feet. They did not listen to my presentation. And then as you start to, put your plants, your rock, so like this is helping to kind of slow and spread that water out, so it'll kind of hit their area, and then they've got their mulch. So you can do any kind of aesthetic thing you want to it. You just want to make sure it's going to work and allow the rain garden to operate properly. The other thing is, when you're planning this, is think about, because when you get into plant selection, think about, is it full sun? Is it part? Is it shade? Because that's going to determine what kind of plants are going to be successful there. And then the other big part of thinking about plants is, can I make my garden bloom essentially, throughout the 7-8 months that it's soil temps are 58 degrees or above. That's one of those things I want. And then what colors can I have? Can I have multiple colors blooming at different times of the year? Those are all those things that go into that plant selection. And then your water tolerance. So everything that's going to be in that bowl, those are going to be those wet feet plants that you have in there. So this is what we started with out at the Bish. If you guys know where that's at on Ohio Street, they had kind of this area that is, kind of looked like that for a little while. And we thought this would be a great area to put a rain garden. They have good traffic through there. It'll be a great educational piece. So this is what we started with. And again, we're catching that downspout there. And then as we went into excavation, you can kind of see our bowl that's in there. You can definitely see it on this side where it goes up. So we are putting everything in there and hoping that all that water will stay and be utilized by the plants, and then go through the soil profile. And then when we finished, we have this. You can see our rock. We don't have our downspout on it yet, but that's kind of the rock that we're going to put all of that water on and let it kind of just flow off of it and into our garden. So it can be a really neat focal point. And that's just going to get, fuller as those plants reseed themselves and spread out. Where it.
The goal for the plants to take over that
Yes.
whole area.
Yep.
And it just be.
Yeah. And you can make it where, if you wanted a rock feature or something inside, you can make it where, you can have some of that mulch color, rock, whatever you want. You're going to work at it a little bit, because once these get established, it's going to fill itself in.
So is there going to be blooms with these down the road?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And they bloomed a little bit last year. They should bloom a lot more this year. And the other thing we're going to do is get our sign installed, just so, you look at that and you may not know, you don't know what that is. It just looks like it's a landscaped bed. But we're going to have our sign put up hopefully before the Bash at the Bish, which is here at the end of the month. And it just gives you some of that information about rain gardens, lets you kind of see what a rain garden looks like. Yeah, they're considered pretty native. Yeah.
Do you have a list for us on these native plants?
We do have, I do have a couple of handouts that you can take for plants.
I'm feeling better because those look like flowers to me.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Not like weeds.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, some of those will bloom for quite a long time. There are some like asters sometimes seem to look like thistles for a really long time, and people don't like that, but they bloom and they look really nice and they get a little woody looking. But so we put all of the plants that we put into this garden on there so people could get an idea of the color. We try to have that bloom from May to October. It's kind of our goal. It not all of it, but hopefully a couple of those will bloom throughout that time frame. So again, when you're selecting plants, bloom time, think about your color, think about, you know, where it's going to be located, and then that sunshade preference, because there's lots and lots of options out there to try and get those colors and make it not just look like a weed patch. And then this is just something, you know, so if we chose these plants, here's kind of our bloom, and we get ourselves from our May to October, and we get a few different colors coming in. You know, May is kind of limited there on this one to that blue and kind of blue purple, but then we'll get our whites and oranges coming in. So it's kind of a neat game to see what can you put into it, how many different colors can you get to bloom at different times, and can you keep that variety throughout?
The butterfly milkweed.
Yes,
Is that one of the?
that's the orange one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was that colorful.
Yeah. The regular milkweed's not as colorful,
Okay.
but there's the butterfly, and then the swamp milkweed has kind of like a pink color to it.
Mary, Richard was always really big on having an area for the milkweed, weren't you? For the monarch
Yeah.
butterflies?
Oh, yeah.
You still do that?
Not so much out front anymore.
Okay.
I'm not sure what's going on in the back.
Okay.
Yeah. Milkweed has been a really big push for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, just because of the monarchs and trying to give them, you know, that food source. I brought some with me. So every year we collect milkweed pods from people, and we will, with the state, we'll weigh how many pods we get, and then that's like our percentage of total pods collected, and we'll get that percentage back in seed to give out, which is kind of neat because, you know, you've got a little story behind the seed. It actually goes through the prison system to get cleaned. I don't know if you've ever seen a milkweed pod, but it's got all that white fluff in it, and so they clean it and bring it back. You know, it's something like that to us. So it's kind of been a fun program that we have, and people just bring in more and more every year. Yes, the kind of pinkish. Yes, that is. Yep. It can get pretty. What, maybe 4 to 6 feet, maybe. I think. I think. I'd have to look at. I thought that gets pretty tall in that 4 to 6 foot. We'll see if it's in here. Nope, that's a ring. Yeah, you want to. Yeah, 4 to 6 feet in height, which one of the handouts I have gives, one of their columns is height. Yeah, and that's another good point, that when you're planning this, you don't want to have really tall stuff on the outside. Like asters can get kind of tall, and you don't want to hide everything in the middle. So you've got to think about height as well, which I didn't include in this. So a big thing is going to be patience. You know, it's going to take time for those plants to develop. They're going to, you know, they're going to look rough for a little bit, but they will, you know, they will make themselves fill in the area. And then again, know your site, consider your budget. How much do you want to put into this? what are all those, if you're going to do a rock border and you're going to have decorative rocks in it and you're going to have all the plant material, what are all those things that you want to go into your site? And then that last one is a big one, that low maintenance doesn't mean no maintenance, because it will take maintenance. We planted a nice pollinator patch this is the third year for my mom on Mother's Day, and because she'd always kind of wanted some wildflowers out there to be able to look at. And we told her, we're like, there's going to be maintenance that goes with this, because otherwise it's just going to turn into a weed patch. But it's really neat, and we like to go over there at different times of the year and see what's blooming now. There's one, I forget when it is, it might be July, where it's just yellow, and everything that blooms is yellow. Didn't really think about trying to get some other colors in there, but it's just kind of a neat little thing, and it's probably kept her a little busier than she wanted, because it's a bigger patch than maybe what we should have put in, but it's pretty cool to look at, and we enjoy it. What's that?
You haven't been disowned yet.
No. I told her maybe we'll start over and we can make it a little smaller, because we were working on making a path through it so she can go through and weed. So yeah, it's one of those things that's kind of fun to work on. And then so weed control. Ideally, you get to that end of season. If it was a perfect world, we would probably want to try and burn that, because a natural burn just is amazing for how it will actually come back. But most of the time, you're just going to mow it and try and pull that stuff off and let it come back the next season. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears into rain barrels. And this is just another way to kind of utilize that rainwater that we get. So you can set up we sell 55-gallon barrels. We sell the kit that goes with it to connect it to your downspout. And really what you're trying to do is just save a little bit of that rainwater and maybe utilize it to water your flowers a little later when it's not so wet. Because if you've ever noticed the difference between watering something and a rain shower, of how the plant responds is night and day almost. We've had people decorate rain barrels where it matches their site, so it kind of blends it in. And then we've also, not for a couple of years, but we would have a rain barrel decorating contest with the schools. And usually it goes into the art programs, and we give them a theme, like we had recreate a famous work of art or movie posters. And watch how creative the students get, and we utilize these to just promote rain barrel use. And as you can imagine, it's only 55 gallons, so it doesn't stop all of the water, obviously, or collect all the water. You can get bigger drums to utilize, and you can still use this kit. The parks and some others have used 250-gallon totes, and they'll that usually have like that frame around it. And they've got some stacked up. So like you can store a lot of rainwater. And the higher you get, the more pressure you build. So you can actually use it to, use it through like a drip tape or something else to get it to where you want to utilize it at. But we do sell these. They're $45. This kit is really nice. Back when I started, we did this elaborate like rain barrel connector workshop, and you would use PVC, and you'd cut your downspout off, and you'd put elbows on and bend it into the barrel, and then you'd have the elbow go down to overflow and go away like a normal system. And then this thing was made aware to us that it existed, and it gives you the hole saws to cut into your downspout. It gives you the cup to collect the rainwater connector. It gives you a spigot. It's a great thing. And it allows that downspout to operate as it normally would, but it'll collect the 55 gallons, and then the downspout just operates normal. Yes?
My dad's assisted living up at Finley.
Mhm.
They have two of those.
Yeah.
In their garden, hooked together.
Yeah. And there are people that'll hook a number of them together and just watch how they feel. And yeah.
They do these extra things with the residents.
And it's nice to to give everybody something to kind of look at and learn what they're doing there. But it's also a way to minimize some of that stormwater impact. Now, 55 gallons isn't going to change the world, but if you got everybody to put 55-gallon rain barrel out, you're starting to make a little bit of a difference. So that's one of those programs we have. Okay, so I think back to our seed bomb. Hopefully the paper is nice and damp. And what we'll do, well, wet, whatever. Because yeah, so you're going to, and if you want, you can have some of these bowls and take some of that water out, because we want it to be, so the idea I have heard about the seed bomb is you want it to be kind of like the bomb is, you're going to make the ball with the seed in it. You're going to let this dry, and then you can take it and throw it wherever you want to have these grow. And the paper should hit and just kind of explode, and the seed spreads. And you'll have a nice little pollinator area. So not knowing where you were going to go, we have kind of, I don't know, a few different mixes in here. There's a shade mix. There's like hummingbird and butterfly mix in here. And then there's some sunflowers. There's milkweed. There's a number of different, I couldn't tell you what all is in here, but there's a lot of pretty flowers in here. So I'm not sure how.
All in the same bag?
Yes, it's all just kind of a nice little mix of everything in here. So hopefully you'll all get a little bit of everything. And we'll just have you, take some seed, although maybe I can do it because your fingers are going to be wet, aren't they? Let's see.
So where do we put it?
You're going to just put it in there with your paper.
Okay.
And then you're going to mix it all together. You want me to put it on this side?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Not a whole cup.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And yeah, I put those plates there for you, however you need to utilize them.
You want it to be
If
your
you want to,
workspace?
yeah, if you want to put the ball on it, I'm going to throw this. I'm going to put it in there with your. Nice, healthy dose of.
We worked hard, didn't we, Samara?
All right.
Just make a ball then, right?
Yes, and then just kind of mix your paper and seed all together. And like you can make one big ball, or you can make a couple of different, smaller ones. And what I'll do is I'll give you Ziploc bags to put them in. And then when you take them home, let them dry out. And then you get to kind of play your own, I don't know what you'd call it. It's not Johnny Appleseed, Johnny Wildflower seed, or you get to go seed some wildflowers out there. And think about when you're putting it out, don't put it in a grassy area that's going to get mowed once a week, because it won't establish, obviously. And then,
Okay, one of the things we wondered about is
okay,
once you get done with your part.
this is just the last thing that I say.
She's like, we want our questions.
Is I try and end every presentation I do with this quote from Aldo Leopold. It's just a really good way to think about, and I just wish, and I'm trying to get everybody to think this way as well. That idea of, looking at land as the community we belong to and not something we own, and we'll treat it with love and respect that it deserves. So I don't know. I always like to share this. And if you're ever, if you ever want to read a Sand County Almanac, it's a pretty good book as well. So yes, that's it. Okay. Maybe I can answer the
What kind
question.
of native plants do you recommend for if you want to cultivate bees?
Bees.
Her and her husband are just starting bees.
Okay.
Is that your husband?
How about babies? They put it right by some honeysuckle.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
they seem to love that.
Yeah, what'll be interesting is, does whatever you plant, will it affect how the honey tastes? Like, and what's the effect? Does it, what will it add to that honey? Yeah. Or does it, like they talk about buckwheat honey is something that people talk about has a very distinct, I've never had it that I know of.
We could
But
see 'em
think
going
about-
in and out of there and with the pollen on their legs.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's
Yellow. It was like their legs were yellow. It's
The
like they had
last
on yellow
one,
pants.
It was orange. It was bright orange. Yeah, it was weird.
And what's nice is when you have, your own bees and they start picking up the pollen from around your area, it can actually, if you have allergies, it's supposed to help with your allergies.
Local
And it's kind of like that's a double win right there. You've got nice, fresh local honey and it's helping with allergies. I don't know what would be the best.
So what this buckwheat honey, is that one, you say distinctive?
Buckwheat, it's supposed to have people know that it's like they advertise as buckwheat honey,
Okay.
and it has a
Maybe it's
distinct,
by the field of
yeah, it could
buckwheat.
very much be.
So I wonder what
Um,
flavor it's in.
What's that?
Sorghum.
Sorghum? Yeah.
So if they know they grow it by a certain field, you can call it
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, right?
But it would be interesting to see what are the impacts of whatever plants are around, and like the fruit trees make the honey sweet. I don't know. I mean, that's
Me
So
neither.
you just
How
want a
much-
bunch of
Like how
flowering
much you
plants.
need around to make a
Mhm.
difference also.
How
Like,
much
if I just have
variety?
one, like I just have a little bit of this and a little bit of that,
Mhm.
it probably won't matter
yeah.
too much of a difference.
And I don't know how far they will travel from their hive to bring it back, and
Yeah.
but you want to make sure you've got enough around there for them so that they do stay.
Yeah.
Which a whole neat thing is like when they introduce a queen or have to get a new queen for whatever reason, and that it's
Like
just kind of a
news, we've got to
and you
gotta get somebody to come and do the back.
yeah.
I didn't remember that. You had a heck of a time finding somebody. didn't you?
Do we have any other questions? Did you get your toadstool question answered?
No,
You
because.
gotta ask.
Oh, that's important, right?
Yeah.
Well, I
So
didn't wanna really get
Into it?
do his thing first.
if you want, you can give me information and I can probably find you an answer. And more than likely we'll go to the university and see what Ohio State Extension has.
Well,
Um,
we had, there's a major area, it was where we cut down trees
mhm.
several years ago. And this last year, this spring, we got all these toadstools popping up in that circle. And we addressed them, they read everything, that's instead of using chemicals, use vinegar, salt.
Yeah.
So we're out there squirting all the time. And we finally got to the point where we were kind of caught up with it. But then I read where that if it's, the alkalinity is off, that's what's causing it.
Yeah.
So change the alkalinity. So I read where baking soda would help, baking soda water. So once we picked all the toadstools for the day and we squirted them with vinegar, apparently it didn't wait long enough to let that, because putting baking soda on top of vinegar kind of
Does it
cancels everything
cancel it out?
But I thought I waited long enough. Anyway, I watered it, that area with baking soda and water.
Mhm.
And it really slowed the toadstools down. So now we run out and instead of mixing vinegar and salt and stuff, I used to use straight vinegar in a squirt bottle.
Yeah.
We pull the toadstool out, squirt the hole that we pulled it out, keep gloves on, put it in a Walmart bag, tie it up, throw it away, And we've started to catch up with it, but we since have bought a alkaline soil tester.
Uh-huh.
And I just did that after Archie this morning and ran out and dug a 6-inch hole so we could test it, and it came back 7.
Okay. So that's like a
alkalinity.
neutral.
So it should be okay, but Janelle said every day I go out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me or my husband go out and we find, oh, there's another little patch and there's new ones coming up. So we pick those and vinegar them. But
I feel like my
we
teeth is still
bought
in there.
a 50-pound bag of lime because he thought that's supposed to help raise the.
That'll
alkalinity
raise your
up.
pH. Yep.
And the toadstools like the lower.
Okay.
pH, I think.
Okay. I don't know, but like I said, if you want, give me a name and phone number, and or an email as well, and we'll ask around and see what we can find out
Okay.
as far as an answer.
Well,
But more than likely, yeah, it could be something off with the soil that's creating an area where maybe grass isn't going to establish, and
the
it's
grass is
open and it's
flying.
yeah,
He hit it really hard with the vinegar to get, and it killed several patches of grass.
yeah,
So I said, let's just use a direct squirt.
yeah.
But so we went with that. So it's better, but
Well, and
had
that toadstool probably spreads out a little bit, and so it covers
there's
where it shades the.
different kinds that have popped up.
Mm-hmm.
We had, like a round top this morning, just all by itself. And then down at the other end of the big circle was a cluster, probably about that big, of little teeny tiny ones
Huh.
that were all together, but they were easy to pick.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess my husband wanted me to ask, what rate how thick do we put the lime on if he decides to go that way? And will that kill the grass if we use too much?
Well, you don't want to use too much. You're doing the right thing with trying to